Well, hello everyone. It's been a while, I know. I was kind of inspired to make this video by a comment from Principled Uncertainty. I think his name is Jeff with a G. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. I'm just straining my memory. Just sort of saying hello, and at one point sort of, he had commented on one of my older videos saying, you know, revisiting this old video and hoping that you can find some time to make more videos in the future. That may happen. It's probably at least a year away before things change a little bit in my life to make that possible. We'll see. Sort of thinking about a semi-retirement or just a reduction in work schedule at some point. Nothing's in stone yet. I'm working my ass off currently, and that's part of the reason that I haven't made really any videos to speak of for the last while. Is I'm just working too hard. There's just too many things to do in my personal life and in the shop, and so I just don't have time. I'm pretty much healed up, by the way. Thanks for the few of you who've commented about that. I nearly severed my thumb, shattered the bone, and its nerve endings are pretty angry and confused and whatnot, but I've got the mobility of it, thankfully. I didn't lose it. I've got a lot of customers who are old timers, and a lot of them walk in the shop and they're kind of like this. And I've always thought, you know, I really want to make it to retirement with all my digits, you know. And so so far that dream is intact, and I'm pretty safety oriented. This was something that happened while I was on my holidays. I was doing some woodworking, and it was a bit of a freak accident, sort of somewhere between a freak accident and an equipment failure. Or it's not really equipment failure, it's just the way the piece was designed. I was using a chop saw, compound chop saw. I had the chop part of it locked out, and I was running it laterally. There was a kickback, but unfortunately it overcame the lockout, the cam lockout for the chop saw, so when it kicked back, it leapt up in the air. There was just too much movement of everything in that split second. It happens fast. And my hand moved, you know, by the time the saw came back down. And luckily the bone, you know, when the bone was hit by the actual circular saw blade, it rejected the thumb out. Otherwise, I mean, it would have just lopped it right off, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to redesign that little cam lock on it. It's a plate with a spring behind it and a little dog. And it's made so that you can quickly move that thing out of the way if you want to. You just got to pull the plate back against spring pressure, and then you can move it around. But I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to put a spacer in there with a thumb wheel so that when it's locked, it can't move. It's going to be less convenient, of course, when I do want to move the chop saw and you know, move it around or whatever. But it'll be secure at least, and this could never happen again. But anyway, that's the story of that. The only other thing I really wanted to comment on today was obviously the tyrannical situation in the country of Canada at the moment. And there's not much to say, I guess. I think, you know, I'm a voluntarist by nature. And so, you know, I'm definitely behind the peaceful right of protest of the trucker convoy and all the people that supported them and that they represent. I'm not so thrilled about the idea of blockading things. I think that might be a move that you engage in with, you know, way down the line at some point if you're not achieving redress of grievances and things like that. But I don't think we were anywhere near that point. I think that was a bit of an unforced error probably on the part of the convoy. Justin Trudeau had announced his desire, well, it was really a declaration of war, I think, when he dismissed the concerns and the protesters themselves as being, you know, racists and misogynists and people with unacceptable views and things like that. That's, you know, what I'm struck by actually is Jeff had commented on one of my videos. It was actually a video about a discussion or videos back and forth between Stefan Molyneux and Thunderfoot. So obviously it's a bit of an older video. It's back when Molyneux was on YouTube. And that and other videos in my catalog have all really been about, you know, I've talked in the past about misusing the tool, talking about this great tool that we have as the internet and the ability to communicate with one another and to engage in meaningful discourse and to really try to understand one another and to come to the table with empiricism and rational thoughts and all that stuff. And also other videos where I've talked about, I feel like we did take a pivot And it might have been, I mean, this is all arbitrary, of course, but it might have been right around the time when the Punch a Nazi thing came out. And I've got a video about that. I've got many videos about this idea of dismissing people to the scrap heap of irrelevance by denouncing them using certain labels instead of engaging with ideas and actually having the honesty to try to engage with people and find out why they believe what they believe or why they think what they think. And even in the issues that I've had in communicating with people, I've found that if you engage with someone honestly, at some point you realize they're probably not evil. They might be wrong. They might believe something for the wrong reasons, or their logic might be faulty or something like that, but they're often not evil, because evil people don't really waste time arguing their positions, right? They don't get impassioned. Sociopaths don't do that. They just do what they do, right? But they don't spend a lot of time trying to make a case for something. And I've long lamented this slide that we've had into just dismissing people with labels and building up straw man arguments in place of their actual position, and then easily rejecting that, and rejecting our ideological opponents necessarily as evil. And this is done on both sides. I've heard Ben Shapiro do this just as much as I've heard Joy Reid or somebody like that do this, rejecting people as evil instead of understanding that they may be wrong-headed, but they're probably not evil. Now, I'm not dismissing the fact that there are evil people in this world. I'm just saying that most of the time I don't think that's the case. And what's lost in this is the ability to actually engage with each other in honest, genuine, meaningful dialogue, honestly trying to understand the best version of someone's argument, the best version of their position, being capable of doing accepting something, on principle for the purposes of understanding it in the moment. You don't have to, it doesn't mean you have to accept it, obviously, and internalize it, but it does mean you're honest enough that you're willing to do that. And I mean, obviously, this has gone now to the point where the leader of our country is doing that. And even you've got the likes of Bill Maher saying, he read that quote where he said they're racist, they're often misogynist, and he just said, no, they're not. Well, clearly. I mean, first of all, you can't paint, an entire movement by possibly the actions of a few people, if that's even the case. I mean, this is probably one of the most peaceful actual demonstrations that anyone's ever seen. Accepting the blockades, I don't think that's violence, but it's not completely peaceful either, because you're restricting other people's mobility. And ultimately, that's what this was all about in a lot of ways. But obviously, I don't agree with invoking what is essentially a War Measures Act, rebranded. And I certainly don't agree with some of the language that's been used. This is, to me, I think it's pretty obvious. It's an easy excuse as a way to infiltrate what all governments are concerned about right now, which is the rise of cryptocurrencies and their ability to control those. It's one of the biggest concerns I've had personally about, I was going to say investing in cryptocurrency, but I don't think a person should really invest in currency necessarily. But is that everybody says, it's out of the hands of government. It's locked away in the blockchain. And while I agree that's true to a point, they can just invoke laws. They can just make it illegal for you to actually possess it even. I mean, even the U.S. government at one point in time confiscated legitimate forms of transaction, right? And so that's the problem with the power of the state, is they can just make it illegal for you to even possess it. I'm not saying they're doing that. I'm just saying that is a tool at their disposal. And I think people need to come to grips with that as at least a possibility. But what concerns me more than that, I mean, that's definitely a big one, is this idea of mobilizing against people who now the government itself can do warrantless seizures, and it is up to the government itself to determine who is a terrorist or who is in defiance of their act, and to act accordingly. And that can even be some little grandma somewhere who thought that the truckers are doing a good thing and wanted to give them $20 right up to whoever, and it's at their discretion. That's dangerous. And especially dangerous, I think, is the notion that someone would come out on the day that they're announcing that they're invoking this Emergencies Act, saying that we will compel people to work on behalf of the government, with pay, of course, like that fucking matters at all, in light of the fundamental concept of what we're talking about, to compel someone to do something for you in a positive vein. That's terrifying. Or at least it should be. I'd be interested to know how many of you are terrified by something like that, because, of course, the interesting thing about government, for anybody who is cognizant and is aware and has done any historical research and has even been aware of the things that have happened in their own lifetime, their own lifespan, everything is incrementalism with government. And everything will be declared as temporary measure, and oftentimes you look back and you go, oh yeah, remember that? That was supposed to be a temporary measure for this or that purpose. And they don't really ever go away, a lot of them. And so when someone comes out and says, hey, we're invoking this act, and they're telling you on the front end, it's sort of like Joe Biden, I heard the other day, he was announcing, talking about, going to help Ukraine and sort of warn Russia and all of this saber rattling that's going on now. And he said, the price of gas is going to go up, essentially. Like he's saying, I'll do everything I can, but I think the price of gas is going to go up as a result. That's not fucking good when they're telling you that on the front end, my friends. That's not good. Same thing with this. When Justin Trudeau comes out on the day that he's announcing the invocation of the War Act, the Emergencies Act, and he's telling you that this allows them to compel people to do work for the government, that's not a good sign. I hope it really is temporary. I think there ought to be motions of non-confidence and legal challenges to the invocation of this act in the first place. That's my personal opinion. I've looked at some of the stipulations that all, as far as I understand, they kind of all need to be met. Because obviously an act such as this, that really is a circumvention of charter rights for at least certain people, there ought to be all kinds of checks and balances. It ought to be a measure of last resort. And clearly, that is not the case. So I do believe that these stipulations all need to be met in order for the act to be invocable. And some of them are things like, whatever is going on, whatever the crisis is, it has to be something that cannot be dealt with using existing Canadian law, which, they already cleared the bridge. So it's odd to me to think that after the major blockade that everyone was concerned about has already been cleared up, and then we invoke this Emergencies Act. Unforced error, or is this part of the World Economic Forum globalist plan? I don't know. These people are all students of the World Economic Forum. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I don't know how much of this is poor management and how much of this is precisely as planned. I really don't know. What I do know is there was not any attempt whatsoever to understand the actual grievances. You can tell the media just comes out and they take an anti-vaccine mandate protest and call them all anti-vaxxers, while on the same program they will say, and I don't know what the beef is, 80% of these truckers are vaccinated anyway. So they're counting on a viewership that is not paying attention, not listening. I try to listen very carefully to words and concepts, and I look for contradictions in anything that I consume, because that usually tells you what's really going on, what the undertones are. But I don't think any of it's any good myself. Again, I'm a pretty libertarian-minded, armchair anarchist person, voluntarist, and that's the country I grew up in, actually. At least my experience of it was for the majority of my childhood. It was the way the community that I was raised in was, and my parents were, for sure. Interestingly enough, I just had some customers here who are from the area where I grew up, and even they said, I was sort of talking about that community concept that we had back then. A lot of homesteaders, a lot of hippies, doing communal style living and things like that. And they were saying that, it's not quite like that anymore, that there have been a lot of changes. And I had talked to them a little bit about the sense that I have that we've gone from this sort of more libertarian society where it was very much live and let live. As long as you're not harming someone else, you live your life the way you see fit, and I'll live my life the way I see fit. And we actually, when we do come together, it's to assist one another and to be kind to each other. And that what I see happening is there seems to be a lot more people that just are hell-bent on controlling other people. Like they just can't stand it if they can't control what another person is doing. Obviously, COVID has brought that out a lot in people with the mask wearing and the social distancing and many of the other things. And that is a really, really negative consequence, I think, of all of this, is that people, it seems to have sparked maybe even in people who didn't have that sensibility, and definitely engorged it in people who already were like that. And, unfortunately, these people from that community where I grew up said, unfortunately, we see a lot of that where we live now too. And they're rural, they're separated from people. And they say there's a lot of nosiness, a lot of people sticking their nose in where it doesn't belong, and a lot of people who seem to be hell-bent on controlling what other people do and how they live their lives. So I don't know what to make of any of it. I'm trying to live my life and do my thing. I'm too busy most of the time to get out much and do much of anything. I'm looking forward to some holidays down the road. They're a long ways off for me right now, but it's sort of all that keeps me going sometimes, is knowing that I'll have some time to get up in the bush where there is no one and have my quiet time. But I got to be honest, I don't see any of this ending anytime soon, save for, because it seems to be just getting worse. The discourse is lost, the dialogue is lost, everyone is just dismissing each other as evil and using, all of these labels to just reject people to the scrap heap of humanity, including, again, our own prime minister. You just don't have to deal with those people anymore, as if they go away. I mean, they still have a vote, they still exist, you haven't changed their minds, they still, they operate now in the shadows, they communicate with each other maybe in the shadows, instead of exposing bad ideas to the light of day, if possible. That I don't see getting any better, and I don't see the actions and the desires of the globalists getting any less bold. So save for maybe an alien invasion or some unifying catastrophe, I don't know that any of this is going to get better anytime soon, and I'm a fucking optimist. Kind of hard to be an optimist, isn't it, with everything that's going on. I will apologize if this video was very clunky. Obviously, I'm not very much in practice of making videos, and it's not the easiest thing to, I seem to be much more fluid with my thoughts, especially during hot tub deliberations. Late at night, I'll go out to the hot tub, and sometimes I talk out loud. I'll maybe talk as though I'm having a conversation with my late father, or I'll just have a talk out loud as though I'm trying to explain something to somebody. And I feel like I'm so eloquent sometimes then. I feel like I can really parse my ideas really, really well. And I often think, well, maybe I should just tape record them, but I don't think it'll work. I think there's something about that that's it'll be a bit of a poison pill for that. So I think I won't even bother trying. But again, I apologize if this has been clunky. And I certainly would love to hear all of your thoughts on the current situation globally, I guess. But in particular in Canada, where we're in not uncharted territory, but it's somewhat it is, because I think this is probably the first time, I think the last time any kind of a War Measures Act was instituted was by Pierre Elliott Trudeau during the 1970s, 1970 it might have even been. And even that was controversial at the time, but I think this makes that look totally legitimate by comparison. I think this is completely illegitimate. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it will be interesting to see how temporary these measures are. And obviously, I'm sure there are a lot of people with crypto and other forms of currencies that are pretty concerned about what's going on right now, as they should be, because we should all know that that's going to be government's aim all over the world, is to figure out how they can control cryptocurrency. It's maybe the one bastion of potentially free expression that might even exist anymore, because the internet certainly isn't anymore. I mean, I think we all thought it was going to be that, and it maybe was that for a time, but it's getting tougher. And even just banking in general is becoming not that anymore. There have been some ideological deplatforming that have happened in, obviously PayPal and other processors, but even major banks now. And crypto is that one area maybe where there's some true democracy, global democracy. And they're going to take a run at that too. Let me know what you think. I'm going to stop babbling. Have a good day.